G'day guys, Rukshan here. Thanks for joining me for the news vlog. For those of you joining in from my state of Victoria, it's been a very interesting day with the weather, hasn't it? We've had extreme temperatures, we've also had extreme winds, we've had hail in some parts. Of course, the bushfires and the dangers that comes with that in the Grampians area, we've had some significant damage being done by that. But amongst all of this, we've also had a failure in our power grid, which has left almost 500,000 people in our state without power. It's crazy to think that this is happening in modern day Australia, in particular in Victoria. I'm not surprised, and many people aren't shocked that we're facing these type of conditions. But as of right now, 500,000 people are without power. And a lot of this has to do with load shedding. That's right. The infrastructure is being protected at the moment by shutting off power to certain Victorian households, which weren't even in the vicinity of where some of this damage occurred, just the way the grid is currently designed and the capacity it has to deal with this type of incidents occurring. So let me read this article from Yahoo News. Last resort blackouts as power plant fails. Australia's largest brown coal mine is experiencing a major shutdown that has left hundreds of thousands without power on one of the hottest days of the year. All four units at the AGL Energy's Loy Yang A power station in the Latrobe Valley shut down about 2 p.m. on Tuesday. The station is the largest by capacity in Victoria, capable of maximum capacity of 2210 megawatts and reportedly generates about 30% of Victoria's power requirements. The Australian Energy Operating Market Operator said that the cause was due to multiple tipping generation and transmission lines in the state, and that it was beginning load shedding, switching Victorians off the energy because of low supply. To keep power systems secure, AEMO has directed AusNet services to enact load shedding. A spokesman said, a controlled load shedding is a mechanism AEMO uses as an absolute last resort to protect system security and prevent long-term damage to system infrastructure. So load shedding, I think another term that we can describe it is as a rolling blackout. So this is where a service provider or the people who are in charge of infrastructure decide to turn off the power to certain locations or areas. They come up with this in some manner in order to protect the system when it's facing these type of conditions. Now, what's happened is allegedly these power lines in this, where was this from? Anarchy, north of Geelong, has been damaged by the wind or by the storm. It's very interesting because the trees looked rather undamaged, but these power lines, look like they've been very severely damaged. The coal-fired power plant itself has not had an issue or a malfunction. It is because of these power lines going down in this area that's caused an issue upstream. I'm not an expert by any means in this field. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my reading on what I am seeing. But with all of this, we have 500,000 people in our state of Victoria without power at the moment. They're trying to bring this up as quickly as possible. For some people, they've said it will take multiple days potentially till it's all fixed up. And this is, again, a modern country. We're in Victoria, right? It's meant to be a first world nation. And we don't expect to see these type of issues in our country. We expect to have infrastructure considering the type of nation that we live in and the resources at hand, that we should be able to withstand these type of incidents where a couple of power transmission lines or whatever goes down. All of a sudden, 500,000 people don't have power. Yes, yeah, of course, it's windy, it's hot, there's bushfires. It shouldn't matter. This shouldn't matter in Australia, is what I'm saying. And now there's an argument going online right now where people are saying that if we had renewables, then this issue would have been avoided. Then there's other people saying, well, look, it's a coal-powered power plant that's failed, or other people saying it's a push towards renewables that we've seen our infrastructure being reduced, or not having infrastructure like nuclear energy and so on to take this kind of load and distribute power in a way that it doesn't require this kind of what's it called, shredding of the power system, right? These rolling blackouts, it's not required if you have the more infrastructure to facilitate the power consumption needs of more Victorians. So amongst all of this, the price, the wholesale price, the spot price for Victoria went up to about $16,000. So all of these extremes happening in Victoria, and I think it all comes back to just poor infrastructure, in my opinion. And if you're in Victoria and you're hearing the government talking about, new homes, you can't have gas connections. Well, those homes right now that don't have gas connections in Victoria, facing this power blackout, right? They can't cook because there's no electricity, right? Or those people in those areas where they have no electricity, they can't charge their Teslas tonight, right? There's no charging of the Tesla, right? That's one of the drawbacks of some of these type of energies. And everyone talking about if we had solar panels and all this kind of stuff or renewables, even in extreme weather, solar panels can get impacted by hail storms, and you have this issue where wind farms are actually shut down because the wind is too strong. There's too much wind for the turbines, right? So to protect the system, they shut it down. So you're seeing that there's issues with all of these type of systems, but we should be able to build infrastructure combining all these technologies, as well as tried and tested technologies, as well as technologies like nuclear, in my opinion, so people can be guaranteed to have power in a modern first world Australia, and that we don't slowly overnight, right, progressively turn into this third world backwater where we have these ongoing blackouts every time there's some extreme weather. Again, that's just my opinion. Let me know if you're impacted by the extreme weather. Obviously, you might not have access to power. You might luckily have a diesel generator, maybe, or maybe some power banks to keep your devices going so you can still access some of these things. But I think it's been quite horrendous today in Victoria, and this is probably the first um, so this is not the last time that people are going to experience this. I think it's going to be a common thing, especially with this push towards all these renewable technologies that seems to be at the expense of just having systems in place that are redundant and that work guaranteed regardless of the conditions around them. Now, the next story I have, guys, is just another one of these sick, demented stories that we keep seeing in the news. And this time it's again to do with our justice system. I'll read this story here. Woman who got teen boy into sex work to fund drug habit avoids jail. A woman who arranged to have a teenage boy engage in sex work to help fund her drug addiction has avoided serving time in prison. Carla Rosa Heath, 48, walked from Brisbane Supreme Court on Monday wearing a hat with a bandana over her face after she received a suspended sentence with a ban from working with children. Heath had earlier pleaded guilty to one count of supplying dangerous drugs to a child and one count of engaging a child in prostitution. How does an individual, an adult, engage a child in prostitution um, to fuel their drug habit, of all things, and then ends up avoiding jail altogether? Isn't there something going on with our justice system? And again, this is in Queensland where we're seeing all types of other failures in the justice system. But I just read this story and I thought, this sounds ridiculous. I'm not going to read any more of this. That should be enough. I'm going to move on to the next story. This one is the federal government moves to criminalize doxing. So this is document dumping after publication of Jewish Australians' WhatsApp messages. The federal government will move to criminalize doxing after details of WhatsApp group involving hundreds of Jewish Australians were published online. The government said the legislation aimed at outlawing the practice of publishing personal details with malicious intent would be brought to Parliament as soon as possible. The log of private WhatsApp group involving Jewish Australians largely working in creative industries was recently published online. I think a lot of that blame has been put towards, at least in the online commentary I've seen, allegedly Clementine Ford published it to a lot of her followers on social media, the feminist so-called. She published it to her followers and with a link to this group with all these access to these people's details, home addresses, work addresses, and their professions, and so on. This just seems to be a part of some sort of ongoing battle between pro-Israel and pro-Palestine groups here in Australia. But it is an escalation when you have details of people leaked to the public, private details especially, of people who are engaging in political activism or talking to each other for political purposes. It's not always clear necessarily that this requires those details to be leaked online publicly. It's one thing to say that these people are involved in a group and say who those people are. Then it's another thing altogether to then say, oh, here, this is where they live, this is where they work. That invites all types of nefarious intent and activities potentially. So this law seems like a good move, especially in the digital age that we live in, where people's details are always at risk of being leaked online. I know I've had attempts of people trying to dox me and do all this kind of stuff to me, particularly during my coverage of the COVID pandemic when I was covering protests and stuff. I actually had to go to the police because of harassment from these individuals who weren't happy with the fact that I was covering protests and were threatening me and threatening to release all this information about my addresses and all these kind of things, which is like crazy of these individuals. So I think it's good to have some type of deterrent in these instances. But again, it's a balancing act, and it's not necessarily clear if these laws will be effective at all, because how do you know exactly who the people who are doxing it are. In this instance, we have Clementine Ford, and a lot of people publicly sharing this information. But sometimes these kind of leaks can be done anonymously as well. I think it is more of a deterrent to stop people who are prominent individuals from leaking information without having some type of deterrent to make them think twice about it. Let me know your thoughts about this. Now, the next story I have is there was a documentary airing on the ABC over the last couple of weeks, I believe. It's called Nemesis. And on Nemesis, my arch nemesis appeared yesterday. That is Premier Daniel Andrews from Victoria. And this is what he had to say about why he had to do multiple lockdowns, or I believe 6 lockdowns in Victoria.
Not everything had been done right. But the reason we had lockdowns, a point that was missed by many, the reason we had lockdowns is we didn't have a vaccine. And states weren't in charge of ordering that. It was a total shambles.
This is thanks to Australians versus the Addenda, who clipped this video, and they've written, the former Premier of Victoria, Dan Andrews, on Nemesis last night. The reason we had lockdowns was because we didn't have vaccines. 6 lockdowns, bro. 6 lockdowns in Victoria, and many other states in Victoria also didn't have vaccines or whatever because of the same issues. Let's say that Daniel Andrews was correct around Scott Morrison's performance during that time. Well, the other states didn't have the same type of issues as extreme as Victoria did. Many parts of the world didn't have issues as extreme as Victoria did. And many other states didn't have issues like the hotel quarantine failures and multiple other failures by the state government of Victoria. So this nemesis here, Mr. Daniel Andrews, who has now run away from Parliament to start a business with Chinese links, allegedly, he's sitting around now trying to reinvent history and blame everyone else for his stuff-ups, right? Him and the health officer at the time, Brett Sutton, these are the people who made the decisions that led Victoria to disaster. And now they're all just trying to rewrite history. Complete and utter nonsense from Daniel Andrews. And speaking about vaccines, there was quite an extraordinary exchange on GB News at a town forum style event that they were holding, including the Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak. And this is the exchange that happened when a vaccine injured individual asked the Prime Minister a question regarding failures by the government to help people like him, as well as the silencing of people like him by institutions, governments, and the media. Let's have a little bit of this clip. I don't know if I can play all of it because of, YouTube and all these kind of social media platforms not being friendly again towards just discussing the truth, even when it comes to political truth like this of a debate that is happening right now. But let's play the video.
Hi, Rishi Sunak. I've got so much to say, but such little time. My name is John Watt, and I'm one of the COVID vaccine injured in this country. I want you to look into my eyes, Rishi Sunak, and I want you to look at the pain, the trauma, and the regret I have in my eyes. We have been left with no help at all. Not only am I in here that's vaccine injured, there's another man over there whose life's been ruined by that COVID-19 vaccine. I know people who have lost legs, amputations. I know people with heart conditions like myself, Rishi Sunak. Why have I had to set up a support group in Scotland to look after the people that have been affected by that COVID-19 vaccine? Why are the people who are in charge, who told us all to do the right thing, have left us all to rot and left me and the thousands and the tens of thousands in this country to rot? Rishi Sunak, look me in the eye. When are you going to start to do the right thing? The vaccine damage payment scheme is not fit for purpose. In Scotland right now, according to the yellow card system, there are over 30,000 people that have had an adverse reaction to that vaccine. And
Okay.
Deaths.
John, thank you very much indeed for your question.
For you to start doing the right thing, Rishi Sunak, and the rest.
You've made a
So I'm going to stop that there, guys. If you want to check that out, you can go to my X or my Instagram. I've got that full video. It goes for about 3 minutes. Rishi Sunak pretty much says that he didn't know that people were being silenced, and he just, I guess, shifted responsibility over to the medical fraternity and doctors that gave the advice around these things. And he also talked about, there's a vaccine compensation scheme in relation to these kind of issues. That's why that scheme exists. Now, this individual that was speaking up was saying that this scheme is not really helping the people in this regard. And he was telling Rishi Sunak to look him in the eye and face these issues. And we're seeing this reckoning happening all around the world. And regardless of what you think of Rishi Sunak, at least he was at this forum. It wasn't specifically for this reason, and I'm not sure if he anticipated such a question being put to him, but he did attempt to answer it. And it is the usual spin from these politicians. But at least he's at these type of debates and forums, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing. But whether this gentleman putting this to him progresses this further, and there's more government intervention in this place, and there's more increased awareness around the issues facing people who have been adversely impacted by this vaccine, because that is a part of it. You can't deny it, right? YouTube, you can't mark this as misinformation or disinformation, because this is happening. So yeah, and by no means am I a medical expert. I'm just putting that online. I'm just talking generally from what we're seeing out there. Anyway, guys, that is it for my coverage today. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. You can follow along with my work on YouTube at The Real Rukshan. Hit that subscribe button. You can also hit the notification bell, and that'll give you more instant updates when I upload something. I'm also available to be followed on X, which is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, and Odyssey at The Real Rukshan. See you guys tomorrow.